Random House Audiobooks presents D is for Deadbeat by Sue Grafton. Read for you by Judy Kaye.
D is for Deadbeat. Later, I found out his name was John Daggett, but that's not how he introduced himself the day he walked into my office. Even at the time, I sensed that something was off, but I couldn't figure out what it was. The job he hired me to do seemed simple enough, but then the bum tried to stiff me for my fee. When you're self-employed, you can't afford to let these things slide. Word gets out, and first thing you know, everybody thinks you can be had. I went after him for the money, and the next thing I knew, I was caught up in events I still haven't quite recovered from. My name is Kinsey Milhone. I'm a private investigator licensed by the state of California, operating a small office in Santa Teresa, which is where I've lived all my 32 years. I'm female, self-supporting, single now, having been married and divorced twice. I confess I'm sometimes testy, but for the most part I credit myself with an easygoing disposition, tempered perhaps by my exaggerated desire for independence. I am also plagued with a sort of doggedness that makes private investigation a viable proposition for someone with a high school education, certification from the police academy, and a constitutional inability to work for anyone else. I pay my bills on time, obey most laws, and I feel that other people should do likewise, out of courtesy, if nothing else. It was late October, a day before Halloween, and the weather was mimicking autumn in the Midwest, clear and sunny and cool. Driving into town, I could have sworn I smelled wood smoke in the air, and I half expected the leaves to be turning yellow and rust. It was a typical California unseason, but it felt like fall, and I was responding with inordinate good cheer. I'd come into the office that Saturday morning to take care of some bookkeeping chores, paying personal bills, getting out my statements for the month. I was so intent on the task at hand that I didn't realize anyone was standing in the doorway until the man cleared his throat. I reacted with one of those little jumps you do when you open the evening paper and a spider runs out. "I'm Alvin Limardo," he said. "Sorry if I startled you." "That's all right," I said. "I just had no idea you were standing there. Are you looking for me?" "If you're Kinsey Milhone, I am." I got up and shook hands with him across the desk and then suggested that he take a seat. He was in his 50s, too gaunt for good health. His face was long and narrow, his chin pronounced. His hair was an ash gray clipped short, and he smelled of citrus cologne. The 2 inches of narrow wrist extending cuffless from his coat sleeves suggested shabbiness, though his clothing didn't really look worn. He held a slip of paper which he folded twice, and he fiddled with that self-consciously. "What can I do for you?" I asked. "I'd like you to deliver this." He smoothed out the piece of paper then and placed it on my desk. It was a cashier's check drawn on a Los Angeles bank made out to someone named Tony Gayen for $25,000. I tried not to appear as surprised as I felt. He didn't look like a man with money to spare. "You want to tell me what this is about?" "He showed me a kindness when I was down on my luck. I want to say thanks." "What do you need me for?" He smiled briefly. "An attorney would charge me $120 an hour to handle it. I'm assuming you'd charge considerably less." "So would a messenger service," I said. "It's cheaper still if you do it yourself." He cleared his throat. I tried that, but I'm not entirely sure of Mr. Gayen's current address. At one time, he lived on Stanley Place, but he's not there now. I went by this morning and the house is empty. Looks like it hasn't been lived in for a while. I want someone to track him down and make sure he gets the money. If you can estimate what that might run me, I'll pay you in advance." "That depends on how elusive Mr. Gayen turns out to be." He took out a checkbook and began to write a check. $200? "Let's make it $4. I can always refund the balance if the charges turn out to be less," I said. In the meantime, I've got a license to protect, so this better be on the up and up. I'd be happier if you'd tell me what's going on." This was where he hooked me, because what he said was just offbeat enough to be convincing. "I got into trouble with the law a while back and served some time. Tony Gahan was helpful to me just before I was arrested. He had no idea of my circumstances, so he wasn't an accessory to anything, nor would you be. I feel indebted." "Why not take care of it yourself?" "It's sort of like that Charles Dickens book, Great Expectations. He might not like having a convicted felon for a benefactor." I shifted restlessly in my chair. What's wrong with this picture, I asked myself. Where'd you get the money if you've been in jail? Santa Anita. I'm still on parole and I shouldn't be playing the ponies at all, but I find it hard to resist. That's why I'd like to pass the money on to you. I'm a gambling man. I can't have that kind of cash around or I'll piss it away, if you'll pardon my French. What was the felony? I asked. He dropped his gaze. I don't think that pertains. The money is clean and I came by it honestly. There's nothing illegal about the transaction, if that's what's worrying you. Of course it worried me, but I wondered if I was being too fastidious. There was nothing wrong with his request on the face of it. All right, I said. He nodded once, pleased. Good. I sat and watched while he finished signing his name to the check. He tore it out and pushed it toward me. My address and telephone number are on that in case you need to get in touch. I pulled a standard contract form out of my desk drawer and took a few minutes to fill it in. I got his signature, and then I made a note of Tony Gahan's last known address, a house in Colgate, the township just north of Santa Teresa. He stood up, and I did too, moving with him as he walked toward the door. He paused with his hand on the knob, gazing down at me with a remote stare. One other thing you might need to know about Tony Gahan, he said. What's that? He's 15 years old. I stood there and watched Alvin Limardo move off down the hall. I should have called him back, folks. I should have known right then that it wasn't going to turn out well. Instead, I closed the office door and returned to my desk. I locked the cashier's check in my file cabinet. When the bank opened on Monday, I'd put it in my safe deposit box until I located Tony Gahan and then turned it over to him. At noon, I closed up the office and went down the back stairs to the parking lot, where I retrieved my VW, a decaying sedan with more rust than paint. I went by the post office and dropped the mail in the box, and then I stopped by the bank and deposited Alvin Limardo's $400 in my checking account. 4 business days later, on a Thursday, I got a letter from the bank informing me that the check had bounced. According to their records, Alvin Limardo had closed out his account. My account had been debited the $400, and I was charged an additional $3, apparently, to remind me in the future not to deal with deadbeats. I picked up the phone and called Alvin Limardo's number in Los Angeles. A disconnect. I'd been canny enough to ignore the search for Tony Gahan until the check cleared, so it wasn't as if I'd done any work to date. But how was I going to get the check replaced? And what was I going to do with the $25,000 in the meantime? By then, the cashier's check was tucked away in my safe deposit box, but it was useless to me, and I didn't want to proceed with delivery until I knew I'd be paid. Crap. I was going to have to drive down to L.A. One thing I've learned about collections, the faster you move, the better your chances are. I looked up his street address in my Thomas Guide to Los Angeles streets. Even on the map, it didn't look like a nice neighborhood. By 10:30, I'd gassed up my car, and I was on the road. I left the Ventura Freeway at Sherman Oaks, taking the San Diego Freeway south as far as Venice Boulevard. I exited, turning right at the bottom of the off-ramp. According to my calculations, the address I wanted was somewhere close. I doubled back toward Sawtell, the street that hugs the freeway on a parallel route. Once I saw the building, I realized that I'd spotted the rear of it from the freeway as I passed. It was painted the color of Pepto-Bismol and sported a sagging banner of Dayglow orange that said, "Now renting." I found a parking spot across the street and locked my car, then crossed to the apartment complex. The building was beginning to disintegrate. The stucco looked mealy and dry, the aluminum window frame pitted and buckling. I moved into the shelter of the stairs. Most of the mailboxes had been ripped out, and mail was scattered in the foyer like so much trash. According to the address on the face of the check, Limardo lived in apartment...
Sample complete. Ready to continue?